improving the flow of value with Satan at scale for Azure DevOps. That's quite a mouthful. So that means that there will be a lot of interesting stuff in the next hour. So maybe Volker, you want to things off?
Thanks for the welcome, Matthias. And I'm Volker Schumann. I'm from Scaled Agile. I'm running the Nordics, engaging with helping partners and customers. And I'm happy to give you a warm welcome as well from Hamburg, Germany. I'm happy to get this right before midsummer. And I appreciate all the Scandinavians showing up today, as I know you have a tight schedule before midsummer, and we want to get everything done. A few logistics. Please turn off your camera if you do not want to get recorded, as we will record this session. Please put questions in the Q&A. We will comment on those questions in the last 15 minutes, and you will get muted just to have for best audio quality. And now I want to hand it over to Andrew Sales. Please go on. I think you can bestly introduce yourself.
Yeah, well, thank you, Volker. Maybe I'll start, Matthias, with a quick introduction and then pass it back to you. I know you have some of the team online and you'd like to introduce them as well. Just to reiterate what Volker and Matthias said, it's really great to see so many people here today. I think I've met some of you. I see some familiar names, and it's great to meet those that I haven't. My name's Andrew Sales. I work at Scaled Agile in the role of Chief Methodologist. And as you know, in the last 2 months, we released a significant update to the framework, SAFe 6.0. Flow was a big part of that, and I'm really looking forward to getting into some of the detail today and getting to, alongside Matthias, show you how the at-scale extension supports everything we've done in the new update. So maybe, Matthias, you want to say a few things about yourself and the team?
Yeah, sure. So, hi, everyone. Matthias Olausson from sunny Gothenburg, Sweden. So I'm the CTO, and I also have the pleasure of being responsible for the team building the at-scale extension that we will look at today. And with me today, I have Jimmy, the product owner for at-scale, and a couple of other people from our team as well, including Dexter, our sales manager. So we make sure to keep track of questions during the session here as well. And with that, I guess many of you know what Scaled Agile, who they are, but maybe not all of you know about Solidify. So super happy to see a lot of new faces on this session as well. But quick background about ourselves. Solidify is I would say a Scandinavian consultancy company who's done DevOps and development consulting for a long time. As part of that experience, and as us aspiring of being a leader provider of knowledge and helping our customers evolve their ability to deliver value, we also want to make sure that the delivery process runs well. And we're kind of known as the platform people. We work a lot with Microsoft and GitHub to tie together practices and good engineering systems. So from those ideas and that consultancy work, we also created the product that we will show today that hopefully you will like as a good add-on to the Microsoft platform. All right, so with that, I think we're ready to start. Andrew.
Thank you, Matthias. So let me move us forward. And just to give a little bit of an overview, perhaps, on the format we're going to use, I'll just start briefly by talking about some of the introductions around Flow that we've done into the new version of the framework. Then Matthias will pick up with a live demo, and then I'll conclude by talking a little bit at how we can accelerate Flow and really improve value delivery through your organizations. So as you can see on the slide here, and I'm sure you've been aware of this since we launched on March 15th, SAFe 6.0 can really be thought of in terms of 6 primary release themes. We did a lot of work in terms of the foundation, things like the Lean Agile mindset, some updates to the roadmap. We did a lot of work around teams and roles and responsibilities. We introduced the brand new responsibility wheel to make it much clearer what responsibilities each role must take on. And of course, we had brand new IP. we had brand new IP around extending SAFe to the business, applying new technologies like AI, and of course, how do we start to think about how we measure the progress we're making through things like OKRs. But the one theme that I've highlighted on this slide, which is really the overarching theme of the whole release, is flow. The flow theme emerged from the fact that a lot of organizations are having great success with putting SAFe in place, putting the new roles, creating agile teams and arts. But actually the real work begins when they look to try and change their systems, their ways of working to accelerate value delivery. And there they were really looking for strategies and guidance on how to do that effectively. A little bit of the background, we started researching flow, I guess about 1.5 years, even 2 years ago now. And we really went back to the roots of Lean, back to the work of Ward, started to think about and reflect on the Lean thinking principles, looked at the work of Goldratt and others. And we started to recognize that regardless of where the flow is taking place, whether it's across a team, an Agile release train, or a portfolio, there are always 8 properties that are used to describe that flow-based system. SAFe, of course, is a flow-based framework. Teams deliver stories each iteration. The art moves features through the continuous delivery pipeline. At the portfolio, we're moving epics through the portfolio Kanban system. But these 8 properties then really allowed us to start thinking about what is the difference between good systems that flow and systems that really struggle to flow. And if you look at the slide here, some of these things will be very familiar to you. Things like work in process. Every flow-based system has work in process. Every flow-based system will have a bottleneck, the slowest point of flow in that system. All flow-based systems require handoffs from one person to another, potentially from one team to another. But lots of other properties exhibit themselves as well. Things like queues, things like the policies that govern the work, things like the batches of the work itself, and of course, the very people that are executing on that work. And you'll see later that we use these properties and the understanding of them to help us think more deeply about how we measure flow and ultimately how we accelerate flow as well. So for us, this was really a breakthrough in terms of clarity of understanding. Now, when we think about flow within SAFe, we certainly don't think about this as a once and done activity. And that's why the work that Matthias and his team have done to really allow us to get access to these flow metrics quickly, easily, and on a continuous basis is so important. And I put on the slide here the basic process that we imagine when we think about accelerating flow. And it starts at the top by understanding what does value look like in terms of the activities that deliver end-to-end value to our customers. The next step will be about visualizing that flow through the use of Kanban systems. And then, of course, critically, we need to measure, accelerate, and ultimately build a flow mindset across the organization. And we see this as a continual loop that occurs all the time at all levels. And what we hope is through the work we've done in SAFe 6.0 and through the at-scale extension and the tools that Matthias is going to show you, you have everything you need to build this particular set of activities and execute this at every single level. I want to say a couple of things about the first few steps, and then I'll let Matthias show us how you can measure flow using the at-scale extension, and then I'll come back afterwards to talk about the practices needed to really accelerate flow. So that first step and the critical starting point for us is to map the value stream. Whether this is the steps that a team goes through to deliver their work, whether it's like the example on the slide here, the steps that an art uses to deliver a feature to their customers, or even the steps that a portfolio takes to move through new initiatives, until we truly understand all the steps that take place, it's very difficult to actually think about how we're going to isolate and identify opportunities for improvement. The other thing we find, of course, that by mapping the value stream, it's a real moment of insight and an awakening, builds the urgency when people really start to see what are some of the challenges we face with delivering value. And you can see on the example on the slide here, one particular step, the step between the product manager accepting the work and that work being deployed to staging, is by far the greatest delay and bottleneck in the system. And it tells us immediately that any effort we spend anywhere else is going to be fairly futile. Only once we address this process impediment are we truly going to improve flow. And of course, once we start to map the value stream in this way, we can start to apply certain measures. We can ask ourselves how much time is spent adding value versus how much time is spent waiting for the next step to complete its work. And then that allows us, and you see this in the bottom right-hand corner, to really talk about the efficiency of our whole process. What is the ratio of time spent adding value to the total time that includes the delays? Things like 5, 6, and 7%, unfortunately, are very common in the organizations that we work with and we help. And this means one very clear thing: very little improvements will come out of improving the productivity of the people doing the work. The biggest improvements are there to be gained by removing the delays between the steps. And Matthias will show us in a minute how the metrics can help us to identify where those delays will be. The second step in the process that I showed you is starting to make the workflow itself more visible, at every single level. One subtle but important change that we made in SAFe 6.0 is to add the final Kanban system onto the big picture at the team level. It was always there at the large solution, the portfolio, and it was kind of implicitly assumed that teams will be using Kanban systems. But now that we've added it, the storyline should be really clear. We expect an organization to see the benefits of having Kanban systems at every level of the organization, allowing them to visualize the flow of work, see where the bottlenecks are, manage their working process, and ultimately connect strategy to execution much more carefully. Again, this is something that Matthias is going to show us how you achieve this in the at-scale extension. And then the final slide for me before I hand over for the demo is the third step around measuring flow. And I just want to say a few things about this in terms of how we see its importance. One of the real challenges that was shared with us time and time again is that many organizations are still trying to manage the progress and quantify the work they're doing through more traditional measures, things like the RAG status of the work, things like subjective reviews based on key milestones, rather than actually taking an objective view of where we are today. And one of the real breakthrough moments that we experienced was that the flow metrics that you see on the slide here, there's 6 of them, they provide this ability now to have an objective view of something that was previously very intangible. Very hard to say where the work is in the system. Now, but by applying these, you start to get that comprehensive view. I'll just mention all 6 very quickly, and then we'll get to see them in action in a minute when we go into the demo. So starting in the top left, the flow load, we're going to see that this is a great metric to help us understand how much work do we have in the system. Too much work, of course, flow slows down or comes to a complete stop. Flow distribution in the top right is going to be a great way to make sure we balance demands from the business against the focus we need to put on the technical architecture and the health of the system. And flow velocity, of course, is a great measure of productivity. How much work are our teams or our arts completing in any one time period? Flow time, perhaps one of the most important. How long are our customers actually waiting to receive that value? And of course, flow predictability. Do we have the ability to make and meet our commitments on a regular basis? And in the middle, flow efficiency, you saw that one on a previous slide. The real power in these flow metrics as we start to see organizations using them, however, is their ability to be applied at multiple levels. We can talk about flow time at a team level. How long does it take them to move stories through, to integrate that work, to release them to customers? We can talk about flow time across the art in terms of features. We can even talk about flow time in terms of new business initiatives at the portfolio level. So they have huge applicability at every level of the organization. It doesn't mean we need to measure every single one at every level, but we need to make choices based on the insights that we want to glean. So maybe Matthias, with that little bit of an introduction, I hope that was a useful setup. I'll let you say a few words about the at-scale extension, and then you're going to bring this to life with a demo you're going to do for us.
Sure, great. Yeah, so you heard Andrew talk about the properties and principles on how to do planning at scale and to get a good flow of your delivery and delivery of value. So what we wanted to do in the next part is to show you how we can put it in practice. And what we wanted to do today is to show how we can use the Azure DevOps platform from Microsoft and the at-scale extension that we build at Solidify. And even though, of course, we're in the product business here, the whole reason to why the product came to be is that we really think it's important to be efficient in the way you do things. So I think regardless of how good practices you have, we need machines and tools to do this at scale and to do this in an efficient way. So like for those of you who haven't used Azure DevOps, that's Microsoft's offering for an ALM platform or application lifecycle management platform. Has a lot of great capabilities to do backlog management, work item tracking, source control, CI/CD, and all that good stuff. But it is a generic platform. So when we've been working with customers in adopting the safe practices, the safe framework, we see that the platform needs to be a little bit more specific. So we built the product to extend the platform with specific tools, and also, as a developer, I'd like to call it like the domain-specific language of safe. So we get the terminology and the lingo from the safe practices as well. So as we'll see, at Scale brings us this integrated tooling for safe on top of what you have already in Azure DevOps. It customizes the processes that you have, adding additional objects so you can track risks, objectives, and other things that you might care about. And we do it in a way that hopefully, as you will see, is very transparent to what you have in the platform already. So we tried really hard to make the UI look and feel similar to Azure DevOps. So it's a low barrier of entry. And it's also, as we like to say, an extension, meaning that everything that you work with at Scale will be stored in Azure DevOps. So it will be work items in your own tenant. You don't have to worry about integration, configuration, security, data protection, all that fun stuff. It's all hosted in your environment. And yeah, I could talk all day about nice capabilities that we have in at Scale, but today I'm thinking I'll be a little bit daring, and I'll do a live demo instead of PowerPoints. So in the demo, we will look at very briefly how we work in Azure DevOps in general, how we set up a configuration in at Scale to support safe. And then we'll quite quickly build a backlog and look at the different Kanban systems that Andrew mentioned. We'll do even more quick PI planning session, so you could experience how that would look like if you were to use Azure DevOps and at Scale. And then hopefully, as you will see, the data that we track and manage, the work that we manage in the system will be something that we can also visualize and try to analyze and measure the flow. So we'll focus mostly on getting some data in, and then we'll see if we can identify how we're doing. So let me share my screen. All right, so the first thing, if you want to get started, you can find Azure DevOps if you Google on that or search for that. Scale is actually an extension that you would find on the Azure DevOps Marketplace. So it's under the planning category, and right now it's also actually one of the featured extensions at the moment. So from here we can get it, install it in our own Azure DevOps environment, and then we just have to go through a basic configuration phase. But yeah, you'll see what it's all about. But what I've prepared in this project is that we have a set of backlogs that we manage. So we will see that we manage our portfolio, our list of features, all the way down to the team level. I just quickly need to see if I can get this one up and running, just see if I see any reactions here. All right, so now I have it on the screen as well. All right, so we will essentially, we want to track different types of work, and we will organize it in backlogs. The way we can set this up in Azure DevOps is by creating views or teams, as we call it. So in this case, I have a portfolio backlog, I have a web order art backlog where I manage my features, and then I have one of the delivery teams or the safe teams here. And then in this setup, I also have a bunch of other teams like the green and the pink and whatnot, and some shared teams that would contribute across different release trains potentially. So this is super easy to configure, and you can create like a Kanban system like this based on your needs. If I want to manage my features, let's say, I will select the team I use to manage that. And as you can see here, actually all the teams in Azure DevOps can have different backlogs as well. So this is coming back to what I said, that this is a platform, so you can configure it pretty much in whatever way you want. So applying safe to Azure DevOps means that you have to customize it to behave in the way that your organization feels is working for you. So in this case, I've kind of done it out of the box by example. So in the feature Kanban, I have a set of columns to track work in different states. If I want, I can view this as a list as well. So I have that possibility as well. So that's really convenient if you're managing your larger set of work and you want to get an overview of more data. Then, yeah, as we're used to in most of our work tracking system, we can work with lists and filter and whatnot. But the Kanban boards are really nice to get this quick view of where our work sitting. I can use the work in progress limits here to see that I'm not doing too much at work at one time. So in this case, I have defined like maybe 20 is what my release train is capable of picking up. And right now I've put 8 features in that column. So theoretically, I still have room to commit to more work. Today we want to focus on flow, but we might have other sessions where we can dive deeper into how you would actually manage the backlogs and what you can do to customize all of this. But it's really easy to set up the way that your team needs. And same goes for if you want to do this for your team, obviously. So I can select the team, and maybe in the team view, I'm tracking the state of stories. So a slightly different Kanban for the teams process. But I want to go back to what I had in my feature board, because that's kind of what we wanted to start with right now. So here we have put 8 features in the ready column, and apparently that's my process for something. And for me, that means that it's ready to be presented at the PI planning, or we are still perhaps refining it, prioritizing it, but that's my bucket for the next increment. I'm using iteration paths and areas to tag work if I like to. So in this case, I'm going to propose these features for the next, for the PI2 planning. And then I already might know that these features are probably likely for the blue team or the green team or whatnot to pick up. What we've seen with Azure DevOps being the really great general platform is that it lacks some of the capabilities that we would like to have working with SAFe. So it doesn't have a notion of an art. We might call things an art, but it doesn't give that context. It's very flat. So we have a list of teams, which is great. I can manage backlogs at all the different levels, but I don't get the context of teams working together. So with that scale, that's one of the things that we get or give you. So after you've installed at scale, it will be one of the different tools that you have in your boards or your planning hub in Azure DevOps. I can click on that. I already opened it up here. And what we have in at scale is essentially a set of different views to manage your different practices. So we have one that we call planning, but it's probably a better name, configuration, because this is where I get to choose the teams that constitutes my release train. And in this case, this is how I can then group, like for the web order art, it's the blue, green, red teams working together. We might have some dependencies to other teams, and I can add those as well. And we can also add teams from different projects in Azure DevOps if you're familiar with that. So you don't need to have everything in one project. You can pull different backlogs from different areas of your tenant. We also give you, because of that, options whether you want to align on cadence or if you want to keep different cadences for each of the teams. Now that will give slightly different behaviors. We're also giving you the possibility, or actually requiring you to associate the arts with time or the delivery. So each PI you can attach to the context of the art. So then, following the preparations I'm doing now, I probably want to go to the or I might want to do some estimation or prioritization before I start doing my PI planning session. So with the WSGIF tool we have, we can do a visual estimation and prioritization of our backlog. So what I put together here is that I have a list of all the ready items in the web order queue. So this would be the 8 cards I had in the previous in my Kanban board. And then I can use different views to assign business value, effort, time criticality, and so on, to build the weighted shortest job first values for my feature in this case. But I can also do it visually, like dragging it over here. Then it will give it, in this case, like a business value of 20 and an effort of 3. And then I can maybe estimate that this one is a slightly lower business value and slightly harder. And what it quite nicely hopefully gives you is that I will get like a heat map of where is my work and how complex and what are the challenges. And it helps me get this additional dimension to my prioritization. So maybe I want to do the high value, low effort one first, like content management. So this will be the sorted list of items if I choose to prioritize based on the WSGIF value, for instance. With that, then I'm ready to go to the program board to start planning, or art board. You have to help me with the terminology here, Andrew. I'm still, I guess, on some of the 5.x terms here, but I'm trying. All right, so this is the program, the art board that we have in AtScale, and this is what it could look like for a previous PI. So this would be PI 1. I have my features, I have dependencies. I can see if I have some challenges in case of invalid dependencies or invalid order of delivery. And this is very customizable, so we can choose which fields to show. We can make the cards small if we want to get an overview. We can hide cards that doesn't have any dependencies, so maybe we use that for our art sync to give us a cleaner picture of what we want to focus on. We get the roll up from child items and so on. So hopefully pretty flexible view. But I wanted to do my PI in 5 minutes, or my PI planning in 5 minutes. So slightly high pace here. So what I prepared for that, as maybe as an RTE, is to go to my setup, define the sprints for the program increment. That's the wrong word as well, for the PI. We actually have a tool for you that automates this. You can just go to the planning, create a new PI, set the dates, and we will generate the iteration tree in Azure DevOps for you and assign it to all the teams in the art. So that's small things that we can do to reduce friction and make things a little bit more fun when you do your planning. But what we wanted to do is to make it really easy to collaborate around the planning. So you might have you have your ways to present to the audience what stakeholder wants to get done in the next PI. Then when the teams should start looking into that, prioritizing, committing, and potentially identifying dependencies, we want to make that easy to do that as a collaborative effort. So similarly to some other use cases in Azure DevOps, we would use like a mapping panel. So we can open up a panel on the side here. Again, it shows me the 8 cards from the backlog by default. And this is because it's filtering on the PI2 that I had prepared all my features. I've assigned all my features for that during the planning, but then I could choose another PI or whatnot. What we see teams often use is that they would filter down the list for the cards relevant for them. So the blue team might be mostly interested in theirs. And then they would pull from the mapping panel and reason about when to deliver. And as you see very quickly, they can just drag and drop and build out the plan when they want to or when they expect to deliver and finalize these features. By default, we pick up, we have an approach where you put the card in the iteration where you plan to complete it. If you want to do something more of a roadmap visualization, we can change that in the settings, and you can do that as well. I'll go ahead and get rid of this, and then I'll just move some of the other cards to some of the other teams like this. And we can close out this one. What's really nice here, I think that the team has done a great job, is that if we move a card between one lane to another, we're actually reassigning this card from the blue team to the red team. So if I open up this card, we will see that it's now assigned here to the red team instead. And I think we can work with it like this. That even works across projects. So that's a nifty feature if you're doing that in your organization, and you know that it can be actually quite hard to move a card that ended up in one project and move it to another. It's a bit tedious to do that using the built-in tools. If the green team and the red team were to be in different projects, you can just drag and drop, and we will reassign it and move it to the other project for you. So that's typically what we do during the PI planning, super fast. Next, we would probably look at dependencies. And what we primarily use in at scale is, I guess, the same as in Azure boards, in Azure DevOps, and that would be the successor predecessor link types to identify dependencies. So we can add that in any way in the system, and it will show here. If I pick one card and drag and drop it on another card, we use that as a gesture to create one of these dependencies. So now we would say that the online ticket system is a predecessor to the localization support, if that makes sense. It's probably not so common that you would have in this, you would use the dependencies and track dependencies within a team, but you can do that. But it could definitely be valuable if you do this for the stories or features that belongs to other teams. If I drag it like this, like the item in sprint 4 is a prerequisite to finalize online ticket booking, then as you see, it will be highlighted as a challenging relationship here. So maybe then we will have to reprioritize. Maybe we will need to accept that online ticket booking might not be done until now, or we need to move some of the cards to other teams. But hopefully, as you see, it's intended to be collaborative, very easy and agile to do this type of planning. And probably I'm not seeing the chat, but some people might ask, which card types can I see on the board? You choose. So I'm looking at features and bugs. You can add your stories, and you can add milestones, enablers, whatever makes sense for you. You can add that. If the team remembers that, okay, we forgot to add, or we need maybe an architectural feature, then we can quickly add that to the board here as well. And refine that as we plan as well. And maybe in this case, we would change like the value area to architectural and do something like that. We can also do the breakdown into child items here, if that's a practice that we follow. So just add a few here. And then we see that we also get a nice progress bar here, or a visual indicator how this delivery is going. And as things progress, eventually it will visualize as done or half done. So that's things that we can do in this view as well. All right. Next practice that you typically do in your PI planning is to discuss any project risks that you might have. So we brought in a risk board to make it easy to, as you go through the PI planning, you can come in here and create new risks. I'm not feeling super creative right now, so I'll just add one. And then at some point you will do your own exercise if you do that. And then you could simply use this Kanban to show whether you own, resolve, accept, or mitigate your risks. Again, a lot of this can be customized if you want to, and filter and so on. The third tool that's quite nice and leads into some of the analytics at the end as well is the objectives tracking that we put in. So we can manage objectives at the PI level or at the team level. And for sake of time, we already included some of the objectives here. And if you want, you can associate objectives with cards on the board, but you don't have to. But you typically, if you follow the objectives practices in SAFe, you want to discuss and set planned business value, and at some point you would go and enter the actual values later on as well. And hopefully, as you see here, we get some visuals to see how we're achieving the goals. And that's kind of the core what you have in that scale. And you would iterate this back and forth. You use the artboard for all your syncs and so on. And we see this as a frequent use for both the teams and RTs and other stakeholders to get the big picture of how things are going. The final thing I wanted to show is the analytics part, and I'm going to ask Andrew to fill in here a little bit as well. But this is a brand new feature that we actually still have in preview. But it is a tool that allows me to add things quickly that I'm interested in. So maybe features, enablers, maybe user stories, and then it will bring to life the metrics that Andrew discussed initially. So we will see the flow distribution, load velocity, flow time, predictability, and we even have the flow efficiency diagram that just need to configure for this team here. And this is the most, I guess, process intense, that you need to decide what state constitutes active work versus inactive work or queued work. But if I do this, then actually we need to remember to...
You forgot to save the configuration.
Thank you, Jimmy. So let's do this one more time. And if I do this, then it will calculate the states for the data I have in this filter. So now I have a flow efficiency value here as well. And this is a little bit crude what we have at the moment. We're iterating it, so you will expect to see much more details coming from us, but it gives you the big picture of how things are performing. And maybe, Andrew, you want to comment on some of the metrics that you're seeing here? Are we doing good?
Just a couple of things. So one, of course, more of a meta comment. You know, it's great having a dashboard like this. I think you mentioned it, Matthias, at the beginning. When working at scale, when there's so much data moving through the system, it's not feasible to collect or visualize this through manual processes. So it's pretty impressive having this in a single dashboard, especially for the flow efficiency metric. You and I talked about that. That's a hard one to really quantify in a way that doesn't rely heavily on manual effort. So that's fantastic to see that there. I mean, just a few things that jump out at me, flow distribution. We can see the work on enabler stories or features increasing. Business features seem to be keeping pace. Maybe the capacity of the art has also increased, but we see a lot of situations sometimes where the art focuses more and more over time on enablers, less and less capacity to put to those business features, ultimately leading to potentially dissatisfied customers. Flow distribution is such a good metric to help us balance the needs of the system and the needs of those who are using the features in the solutions that we build. Flow predictability, of course, we're always looking for that nice 80 to 100% range. These teams in the art look fantastic, so that's really nice to see as well. And then things like flow load, excuse me, flow load is a great leading indicator. If we start to see the load going up in terms of the work that is active now or the work that is in the backlog, we know at some point that's going to have an impact on flow time further down the road. And maybe the last one, Matthias, if you could go back to that flow time histogram, the one that was a slightly wider view, I think you had a few seconds ago with lots and lots of bars on it.
Right.
Maybe it was the features across the PI. I know yeah, that was it. Flow time is great because although in SAFe we talk about making sure that every feature fits within a PI, there's clearly a couple of features here that have gone beyond that. Is that a problem? Well, it might be if they were the most important features to do. If we actually delayed those features intentionally because there was more important work, then it was the right thing to do. So the histogram is a great way to visualize those outliers and then take the next steps to really understand what the root cause was. So yeah, very impressive and great to see it all on a single dashboard like this.
Yeah, thanks.
Would you like me to take over to do the final slides, Matthias?
Yes, please. So I think that's great. Segue over to that. So yeah, thanks.
And I know
we have a lot of questions.
Yes,
for later.
I know, Jimmy. I saw that. So I'm going to be quick. I think we can probably share the presentation with the attendees. So perhaps I can just reference some slides rather than going into too much detail, and then we can get straight into the Q&A if that's okay. Let me just finish the storyline really quickly. So the storyline, of course, that 5-step process that we're following, once we've measured, the next step is to accelerate flow. And a huge focus of SAFe 6.0 was to create the strategies, the activities needed to accelerate flow at every single level of the organization. So we took those 8 properties, and for each 8 property, thought about how do we adjust that property to improve flow in that area. So it could be around visualizing and limiting WIP to help manage the work in process. It could be around reducing queue lengths to better manage the queues that are building up. The important point on this slide that I just wanted to make is I've highlighted on the big picture that there are 4 specific articles that take these 8 flow accelerators and apply them to that context. So once you've understood the metrics, if you want to know about how to improve flow at the portfolio level, the portfolio flow article will do that. And in those articles, you'll see more detail, like the detail I have on the slides here. I think for now, I'll just leave this in as reference, but each article will go through why this particular flow accelerator matters, why is work in process so important to manage, what can we do about it in terms of strategies we can apply, and of course we can do things like set WIP limits, we can visualize the work, we can better manage the flow of that work, and that practice and that pattern is followed through for each of the 8 flow accelerators. So lots of guidance around how to address bottlenecks, lots of guidance around how to organize more effectively. We saw from the work that Matthias showed us that the art planning board is a great way of showing whether we have an excessive number of dependencies that might force us to think about how we reorganize. Things like getting faster feedback. Are we validating we're building the right thing and building it the right way on a continuous basis? And of course, are we working with small batches? Lots of strategies to think about how you can reduce batch size across the entire system, whether it's the architectural batch, the testing batch, the release batch, the validation batch. Batches are everywhere. And then, of course, things like managing queue lengths to make sure that we can be responsive without big queues of work that we've already committed to. And then perhaps the final 2 are worth saying a little bit more on because they're new to SAFe and perhaps they're getting the most attention. How do we build an environment that is really conducive to improving productivity and enjoyment of those doing the work? So lots of strategies in SAFe 6.0 about creating an environment which optimizes time in zone, the ability for people to really be able to concentrate and be productive in their work. And finally, lots of guidance around how do we balance the need to both introduce new practices at the same time as removing or end-of-lifing legacy practices. A lot of organizations struggle with having both in place at the same time. They can, of course, be counterproductive. So this is something we need to attend to. As a final thought for myself before we go for the questions, there's a really important connection between metrics and the accelerators. I'm not going to go through this table now. I put the link at the top of the slide. So when you get this slide, you can explore the article yourself. When you start to interpret the data that Matthias showed us through the metrics, it will surface a set of predictable problems. The accelerators on the right-hand side in this table can then be used to address those problems. So as an example, if you're seeing too much effort being put into either enablers or business features through the flow distribution chart, you may need to get faster feedback to validate whether you have that balance correct. You'll certainly need to manage your queue lengths to allow you to adjust that balance more effectively over time. So please have a look at this. I think it will support you well as you start to use or continue to use the flow metrics that Matthias showed us. And a final thought, of course, none of this really works unless we can build a culture that is supportive to improving flow. So we need to make sure that everyone understands flow, at least at a basic level, can interpret the flow metrics that Matthias showed us across the teams, the arts, and the portfolio. We need to have a culture that really allows us to be transparent, to remember that the facts are friendly, to show these metrics and use them to effectively improve the systems. And of course, we want the teams and those working at every single level to take ownership of improvements, to have a set of items they're always working on to improve flow. And of course, once we put those into practice, we go back to the flow metrics to measure whether those improvements have taken hold and actually delivered the benefits we expected. And this process continues always. There's always opportunities to improve flow and accelerate value delivery. So hopefully, Jimmy, that gives us good time, at least 10 minutes to go through some of the great questions that came in. I don't know whether Matthias or Jimmy, you want to say something finally about this slide before we get to the Q&A.
I think it speaks pretty much for itself. So yeah, if you want to